We are very appreciative of Hemant Mehta coming to talk to us. And he is the founder and the editor of thefriendlyatheist.com. He's also a YouTube creator and a podcast co-host. He's a former National Board certified math teacher in the suburbs of Chicago who continues to coach a nationally competitive public speaking team. Author of many books, publishes crossword puzzles for the New York Times and Slate, and also a Jeopardy champion. And I can attest to that because I saw all his appearances. So will you give me a fond welcome to Hemant Mehta.
I realized I forgot to plug this in. I'm going to do that before this conks out in the middle. All right. All right, can everyone hear me okay? Yep. All right, fantastic. My notes are on here, so forgive me for keeping this up here. Thank you so much to Brian and Stephen and everyone at FFRF Chicago for having this. Raise your hand, how many of you, this is your first FFRF event? That's fantastic. Thank you for coming out here, and be sure to tell the people who run this chapter how you found out about this or anything else like that, and I hope you come to more of their events. I want to talk about this topic in general, Christian nationalism in public schools, because that seems to be a growing problem everywhere, and it's too big. I can't cover that in an hour or anything like that, so I figured I'm going to focus on just one guy and what he's been doing from start to finish as best as I can, because if you don't know this like villain origin story, it's kind of wild how this guy came out of nowhere. And the guy I'm talking about is Ryan Walters, who is, how many are not familiar with this guy? I'm going to blow your mind over the course of an hour, because he may be one of the biggest enemies of church-state separation we've seen in a long time, and also one of the most powerful ones, for reasons you will find out. But the thing that's amazing about this guy is, for all the power he has now, and he is currently basically the head of education in the state of Oklahoma. That's his job title. He's the superintendent of public instruction, which is their idea of the most powerful educator in the state, who gets to dictate, essentially, what goes on in public schools across Oklahoma. Where did this guy come from? Where did he get all this power from? And there's a fascinating story on a website called The 74, which is a nonprofit journalistic outlet that focuses on education. They did his whole origin story, and it was wild, because this is how they opened it. Ryan Walters was one of the most well-liked teachers at McAllister High School, a history teacher, 2016 finalist for Oklahoma Teacher of the Year. He encouraged vigorous debates on pivotal moments like Roe v. Wade, and closer to home, the forced relocation of Native Americans, known as the Trail of Tears. If you talk to his former students who had him in class, and by the way, for those of you who understand a little bit about high school education, how teachers get assigned to which classes they teach, this guy taught like 3 different advanced placement classes, like AP Government, AP History. That's like an excellent workload if you can get it, because they don't give that, especially at bigger high schools, they don't just give that to anybody. You have to be really good at what you do, because what you do actually has an impact on how the school looks and property values and things like that. So he taught the best students at the high school he was teaching at, and he was very popular. Like, students wanted to take his classes because they said, when we talk about things like Roe v. Wade and what's its impact on US politics and things like that, they did not know where he stood politically, because he would play devil's advocate for whatever side you were on if you were debating this in class. And he made everything come to life. He's the teacher you want to have. And not only that, it says he was 2016 finalist for Teacher of the Year. This guy was also, he coached boys basketball, he coached girls tennis. Like, there were so many students at this high school who knew this guy and liked this guy. And the reason we hear their voices in this article is because every single one of them is like, what happened to this guy? Because I loved him in high school, and now I'm a little older. Maybe I've graduated from college by now, and I don't know who this guy is anymore. And that's why they were interviewing them. Ryan Walters went to college at a place called Harding University in Arkansas. And I will tell you, I have been there once. They invited me to speak there years ago, and here's how they put it to me. Every year we try to have someone come to our university whose views are completely the opposite of that of the student body. Because it's a fundamentalist Christian school. So they said, one year we brought in a feminist, one year we brought in a local Democrat. I know. And they said we wanted to bring in an atheist to talk to us. And I've never spoken to a bigger crowd, all of whom were very much against me. It was great. Also, when I logged into the internet from my hotel room on campus that night, I couldn't get to any website I wanted to search for news. Everything was blocked. It was ridiculous. Anyway, that's Harding. That's where this guy went. And so did all of his siblings, however many he has. So the story is, in 2018, he is still a teacher. He has a daughter who plays tennis. He's at a tennis tournament. And he gets to know another father whose daughter is also playing at the tennis tournament. Turns out that father was a guy named Kevin Stitt, who at the time was running to become governor of Oklahoma on the Republican as a Republican candidate. So he wasn't governor yet, but he was running. People knew he was running. Kevin Stitt gets to know this guy, Ryan Walters, and he likes this guy, just like everybody likes this guy when they meet him. And Kevin Stitt says, hey, if I become governor, will you help advise me on education issues? Which totally makes sense, because he's very well versed in education issues and is well liked, and everyone knows this guy. And when Kevin Stitt gets elected that year, he does bring Ryan Walters on to help advise him on issues. Ryan Walters also started running a group called Oklahoma Achieves, which is like the Chamber of Commerce's education arm in the state. They also support school vouchers and things like that. But again, who cares? He doesn't have power to do anything. It's a figurehead sort of placement. They don't really have the ability to do much. And in 2020, Kevin Stitt decides to appoint him to basically his cabinet as the Secretary of Education in the state of Oklahoma. The weird thing about that is that's also a position that is mostly symbolic. They don't really have a ton of power to make a lot of changes in what happens across the state. So in 2022, Ryan Walters decides to actually run for the position, because everything I've said up to this point are things he just got selected to do by one of his friends, Kevin Stitt. He was just appointed. He was never elected to anything. So in 2022, he decides to run for the elected position that gives you power in the world of education, which is the superintendent of public instruction. And he wins that race pretty easily. There really wasn't much competition there. So as soon as he gets that position, this is where everyone's like, wait, we thought you were actually good with education. What is happening? Because as soon as he gets elected, he starts doing a lot of things that raise a ton of eyebrows. So one of his first acts, this is February of 2023, I know it's small print, but look at this very top paragraph. This is a letter that was sent to Ryan Walters from a lot of religious leaders across the state. And when I say religious leaders, if you read the names here, they're all conservative Christian leaders, because no other religion matters at this point. And look at the top paragraph. There's a lot of stuff. We are requesting that you take every action possible to allow corporate prayer, I'm not really sure what that means, and expressions of faith in God back in our public school system. Each of us knows the struggle and turmoil in our communities and the power that prayer and moral character have on kids and young adults. So they want prayer back in schools. And all these conservative Christian leaders, I think this guy has run for public office. This guy is part of a group that helps people run for public office. Like, these are very well-connected, very conservative Christians. And I don't know if they're making this request because they don't know if Ryan Walters will do it, or they're giving him permission to do the thing they know he's going to do. I don't know which of those it is. But Ryan Walters is like, Okay, yeah, I'm totally on board with this. So let me just read to you a couple of the things he did shortly after he got elected. He started approving the use in public schools of material from Prager University, which is not a university, but a right-wing, basically, YouTube channel that puts out, like, whitewashed American history videos and things like that. And he says, yeah, if you want to use that, we support you. He also claimed the Tulsa Race Massacre had nothing to do with race, which you would think would be a thing people should know about, especially in Oklahoma. Which is also weird because, again, I showed you at the very beginning, when he taught these issues in his classes, students were very well equipped at the end of it because he wasn't taking sides, he was actually teaching them this stuff. Now he's very much taking sides, and they're all the wrong sides. He also says that Joe Biden at the time wants to destroy our Christian faith. That's a direct quote. Surprise to me. I feel like I would have been on that email chain. I was not. And maybe most importantly at the time, but it wasn't a big deal, at the time, he made a push in Oklahoma to give approval. They have their public school system. They also have taxpayer-funded charter schools in the state. And they also have virtual schools, which really came about and flourished during COVID. He said, I want to make sure that a Catholic school that is applying to become a taxpayer-funded charter school gets approved. And because of him, it did get approved. The Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, who is a Republican, was like, hey, judges, you cannot allow this to happen. We have church-state separation. Republican in Oklahoma said that. And the Supreme Court of Oklahoma was like, yeah, we do have church and state separation in Oklahoma. This is absolutely illegal. You can't have a taxpayer-funded Catholic school because that destroys the whole concept of private schools, religious schools, what have you. And that case went to the Supreme Court, and they just heard that case a few weeks ago, and we're still waiting on what the Supreme Court is going to do, even though everyone seems to know exactly what they're going to do. But that's also an issue because of Ryan Walters, because he made the push to get that charter school approved in the first place. So this is what he starts to do in the state of Oklahoma.
My best guess, as a definition of corporate care, is that it's an explicit classroom exercise. Like if you said, okay, all of you people are going to say the Lord's Prayer out loud.
Yeah.
I call that corporate.
So it's like a group prayer, make it a group thing, not just an individual thing. Fair enough. So this is what this guy starts to do. He also formed a faith committee to look at how do we get religion in public schools. That committee was also full of conservative Christian pastors, including some of the people on this list. And like, what did they recommend? Their recommendation was like, we should put the 10 Commandments in every classroom. That's the sort of thing they were trying to push for. Here's maybe the most egregious thing. This is October of 2023, shortly after the attack in Israel. He sends out an email to every superintendent in the state of Oklahoma saying, hey everyone, I know you need prayer in your school. Here's a sample prayer you can use in your schools. Offer a prayer of safety and peace for the people of Israel. We pray that violence against the Jewish nation should stop. And without even getting into the political stuff that's happening in Israel and Gaza and all that, why is Ryan Walters sending a sample prayer to public schools? I mean, to be clear, most of the superintendents, as far as like the bigger school districts who actually talk to the press, they're like, we're not using this. There's no reason we would use this. This feels like a thing that we should not be telling students how to pray. That seems weird, but this is what he is sending out to everybody. And so this is all a lead up to what he actually is maybe better known for. Because cut to June of last year, is this June of last year? Yeah, June of last year. It feels like decades ago. But he puts out this video. This is at a Board of Education meeting in the state, which he runs, because he's the superintendent of public instruction. Let's see if the sound works on this.
We're going to make an important announcement today regarding the Bible and 10 Commandments. The Bible is a necessary historical document to teach our kids about the history of this country, to have a complete understanding of Western civilization, to have an understanding of the basis of our legal system, and frankly, we're talking about the Bible, one of the most foundational documents used for the Constitution and the birth of our We also find major points in history that affirm the Bible.
Can you make louder?
So we will be issuing a memo today that every school district will adhere to.
Can you raise the volume?
This is that every
I
teacher,
can't.
every
I'll tell
classroom will have a Bible in the classroom, and we'll be teaching from the Bible in the classroom to ensure that this historical understanding is there for every student in the state of Oklahoma, in accordance with our academic standards and state law.
So if you missed that, what he was saying is we're going to get a Bible in every classroom in the state of Oklahoma so that students can learn from the Bible in their public school classrooms. No specifics on how he's going to do this, but this is what he wants to do. That's the U.S. Constitution. That's the Bible. He wants to get that Bible in every classroom in the state. And just to cover some of the things he mentioned there, he said this is historical. We got to teach history here. There's nothing historical about the Old Testament, especially. But I mean, debatable at the very least, right? If you want to say it's history, which thing do you think is historically accurate? Because I feel like that's a bigger conversation we should be having. And the other thing is, he said he wants to get this in every classroom. Why does every teacher need a Bible? Even giving him the benefit of the doubt, which he does not deserve. Why do math teachers need the Bible? Gym teachers, music teachers, why do they need a copy of this?
When he says that,
Yeah.
when he
That's
says
what I think, that's what I
that
would
this would be in accordance with curriculum and state law, does
Yeah.
he at all elaborate on how he's going to alter state law to mandate this?
So the question is, if this is in conjunction with state law, well, how does that work? Because clearly this is against the law, which means something's got to give.
Yeah.
And how's he going to do that? I'll address that in a little bit. But obviously this is a problem and everyone knows this is a problem. But this is what he says he's going to do. Also, which version of the Bible does he want to send to every classroom? Because different Christian groups have different visions of which translation they want to use. Not all of them want to use the King James Version, things like that. Also, when in their crammed schedules are teachers supposed to work this in to what they're teaching? Are they going to be paid for any of this extra work they now have to do? He didn't mention that. What happens if a teacher decides to go down the route of malicious compliance and say, oh, you want me to teach from the Bible? Excellent. Let's all read what Lot's daughters did to him in a cave way back when. It's not just illegal, it doesn't make any sense educationally, and it's the sort of decision that if you actually implemented it, think about what that would mean for the students when they are applying to college. College admissions counselors who are oh, this student has applied from Oklahoma, wants to come into our history department because they want to major in history at our school. Maybe we shouldn't take them in because they don't have the fundamental knowledge that they need to succeed in the college classroom. It's not just Christian nationalism, this is going to hurt the students in the long run, depending on how you do this. Now here's the amazing thing. He said, I'm going to send out a memo to tell everybody how to do this. Let me show you a screenshot of his memo, which again, doesn't have any legal weight, but this is his advice, how we're going to do this. This is a clip from what he wants to do with grade 5, because look at how he shoves the Bible in. In grade 5, kids are supposed to learn the elements of a story like plot, character, settings. That's great, that's fine, we should teach kids that, using biblical stories as examples. Why? You don't need to use biblical stories as examples. Teachers know how to do this using a variety of things. That's what they're really good at. They can pull things from all sorts of resources and get kids to try to figure out this stuff. And the whole thing is you want them exposed to as many types of writing as possible. What else do we have? Literary devices. This one's just funny. Identify and discuss simple literary devices such as similes, metaphors, and personification with biblical texts. You don't need the Bible to learn what a metaphor is. Music appreciation. Introduce students to classical musical pieces inspired by biblical themes. But we're not focusing on the religious content. But just shove the Bible in their faces. It's just ridiculous the way he is trying to cram this in. But again, this is a memo. This is hey, as the head of instruction in the state, this is how I want all your school districts to be doing all this stuff. And the amazing thing is a lot of teachers reacted to that memo by saying, yeah, we're not doing any of this. Which is amazing. Like several superintendents of the biggest school districts in Oklahoma told the press, we're not following the memo. We have a way of figuring out our curriculum. Yes, we have to follow whatever the state standards are, but also we have local control of our school district. We have a group of educators, administrators who work on what's in that curriculum, tailored to whatever the community actually needs. And we are not letting anybody come in and tell us to change the thing our experts have worked on just because you want to do this. And they're all saying it very politely, but they're all saying no. Like if anyone's doing this, it affects very few students. But the biggest school districts are not going on board. Because I think even the superintendents of those districts knew, if you actually go through with this, the teachers at your district will retaliate. And the parents are going to retaliate. And the students will too. Why bring that in? Why even bother with that? Why create a problem where you don't need one? So, Walters then got even more specific. He tells the press, he sends out more memos that say, you have to have a Bible in your classroom, every classroom, and I'm going to give you that Bible for your classrooms. In fact, my office, he says, is going to set aside $3 million to purchase Bibles for all of your classrooms, and I'm asking the state legislature, which is a Republican supermajority, to give me another $3 million so we can fund all of these books for all of your classes. So let's do the math here. There are approximately 43,000 public school teachers in the state of Oklahoma. If you do 6 million divided by 43,000, which I may have done, it comes out to about, what was it? $140 for every book. Why are you spending $140 on one Bible for one teacher across the state? Again, why are we getting Bibles for gym teachers, for math teachers? You don't even need it for them. But even if he didn't get half that money from the legislature, let's say, he only had $3 million, that still comes out to about $70 per Bible.
It's a deluxe.
It must be a fancy deluxe version. Yeah, gold-plated edges, everything. Like, and I don't know if anyone in Oklahoma knows this, but the Bible is free online. For anyone who wants to see. And here's the other thing. So when I was in high school, I took AP English. My teacher, I love that guy. We had a section where we were discussing, I don't remember what we were discussing, but one of the passages we read from was a passage from the book of Ecclesiastes. Not for religious reasons, but to compare that to other types of writing that we were also studying. Every teacher in Oklahoma is already able to do that. Even in history class. If you want to reference the Bible because it actually has a useful purpose, you can already do that. You can do that anywhere in the country. No one says that's illegal. FFRF doesn't say there's a problem with that. Just teach it objectively. That's fine. But this is going well beyond that. So again, he wants to buy $70 Bibles for every teacher in the state. There were reporters that actually asked around. This is a thing his office put out. And what this is a request for proposals. And what he's saying is, hey, book publishers, I want to buy, you can see 2.3, I want to buy 55,000 Bibles from you. Mind you, 43,000 teachers in the state of Oklahoma. I want to buy 55,000 Bibles, but if you win the contract, because you say, hey, my publishing company can give you 55,000 Bibles for X amount of dollars. And usually the way these work is the district says this is what we need. The different companies can come in with their proposals and say, we will do this for you for X amount of dollars. And the district can look at all those proposals and say, this is what will be the best for financially for us, so we will go with this company. This is what he did for the Bibles. He puts out this proposal saying, hey, publishers, I need 55,000 Bibles. You got to get it to me within 2 weeks after we sign the contract with you, which they can't do from scratch. That means they can't just like put together the Bible with everything they need and get it published and send it out within 2 weeks unless they have all these books sitting in a warehouse already. Then what else does it say? It's got to be the KJV Bible, which is the one translation of the Bible that is not copyrighted. so they don't have to pay for those costs. But also, why KJV? For historical accuracy, and it has to have the Old and New Testaments. And then, look at 2.5. It has to include the Pledge of Allegiance, the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, which, again, I don't know if they know this in Oklahoma, also free online. But also, why? That means if, whatever, the Gideons have the Bible in your hotel room, those don't come with the Pledge of Allegiance, which means Gideons can't apply for this. Like, who's publishing a Bible that they have thousands and thousands of sitting in a warehouse somewhere that already has these? They don't. And then, what else do we have? It can't contain anything else. Study guides, narration, additional commentary. So no, like, teen Bibles that some company made specifically for kids. And this is, it's got to be bound in leather or leather-like material because, you know, you gotta make sure it doesn't get ruined. So this is the thing. And a reporter in Oklahoma asked, what was the name of it? Mardell Christian and Education. That's the name of the company. That is the biggest seller of Bibles in the state of Oklahoma, a company that has like bookstores like Borders, Barnes & Noble. They asked them, hey, do you all carry any Bible that would meet these specifications? And according to the person who runs that place, we have 2,900 types of Bibles that we sell. Not a single one of them fits these rules. So that's the biggest publisher in the state of Oklahoma for Bibles. So it turns out, why would you get so specific? There's one reason. Because there is one Bible that does fit all of these needs.
This here from this country, and I truly believe that we need to bring them back, and we have to bring them back fast. I think it's one of the biggest problems we have. That's why our country is going haywire. We've lost religion in our country. All Americans need a Bible in their home, and I have many. In the end, we do not answer to bureaucrats in Washington. We answer to God in heaven. Christians are under siege, but must protect content that is pro-God. We love God. We have to protect anything that is pro-God. We must defend God in the public square and not allow the media or the left-wing groups to silence, censor, or discriminate against us. We have to bring Christianity back into our lives and back into what will be again a great nation. Our founding fathers did a tremendous thing when they built America on Judeo-Christian values. Now that foundation is under attack, perhaps as never before.
Okay, sorry to put you through that. I left out the part where the Bible explodes, right? So funny, yeah.
He didn't use the Bible on his inauguration.
I don't know, did he use that Bible? He didn't use any at the time, that's right, the second inauguration. Yeah. So the thing about this, I don't know if you know the story about this Bible. Do you know Lee Greenwood, the guy who sings God Bless the USA? A couple years ago, he was selling a Bible with, I don't remember if it was a copyrighted translation or the KJV, but he was selling a Bible that had the text of the book, and it had the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Declaration, and the Constitution, and everything, and lyrics to God Bless the USA, and he was selling it for like $50 and pitching it to like MAGA right people as, this is the patriotic Bible, and I don't think anybody bought it. And then Trump's like, how much are you, like, he was selling it for maybe $50. And then Trump came around and said, put my name on it, or let me be the guy who's hawking it for you, because this is what he does. He puts his name on stuff, right? He said, let me sell that Bible, we'll call it the Trump Bible, and we'll raise it to like $60, and I get a cut of every Bible that is sold. That's how this game works. So they have these Bibles just sitting there, and if you go to the website, like this is before Ryan Walter sent out that memo, what's in this Bible? Handwritten chorus to God Bless the USA, because again, they didn't change the contents of the book. Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration, Pledge of Allegiance, $60 plus shipping.
And then wasn't there a bonus Trump steak when you flipped it to Exodus?
You get a Trump steak in the mix. That would have made it slightly worthwhile, maybe. The weirdest thing about this website where they have this book, yeah. Go ahead.
Finish your sentence.
Sure. The weirdest thing about this website is they have a Q&A at the bottom, What if my Bible has sticky pages, which is just a weird thing to have questions about?
Yeah, this seems like something that could be a prosecutable offense, particularly within the emolument clause. Has there been any attempt to do so?
I like how you think the law exists.
Yeah,
So here's the nothing ever came of Trump putting his name on this thing, making money off it. In fact, of all the ways he's done that, this is probably the least money-making version. Like, then he found crypto, and now he's never gone back to this.
particularly within the context of Walter's, like,
Oh.
basically creating a policy that would require
People to buy the Trump Bible.
Yeah.
So, yes, that's where we're going with this, which is this seems illegal. This seems like you're giving a state taxpayer-funded bribe to Trump, right? Because no other book could even satisfy those things. So Ryan Walters was like, oh, you guys are suing me over this? Fine. They took down that request for proposal for the book companies, because everyone's like, no one's applying for this except me. I think if I remember this correctly, one random publisher that wasn't Trump said, hey, we're a mom and pop shop, we think we can get this out to you real quick. And I think Ryan Walters is like, oh no, that's not what was supposed to happen here. Quick, shut it down. So they got rid of that request for proposal. And then he put up a brand new one. And look at this one, he's like, fine, 2.5. You have to provide copies of the pledge, declaration, whatever. But these can be bound separately. They don't need to be in the book, so another company could put out a bid. But also, look at this. It's still, the supplier's Bible has to be leather or leather-like material. Oh, by the way, those additional documents also have to be in leather or leather-like material. Durable material.
Plastic?
Like, you can't just have your stack of Bibles sitting in a warehouse and then print out the stuff from the internet and staple it together and say, here's the little extra thing you needed from us. We'll do that for a couple cents and just attach that to every book. Not allowed. You gotta get like hardcore binding for this. So like, it makes it sound like we're not just trying to buy the Trump Bible, but it totally is. That's really what this was all about. And then there was another lawsuit, because this doesn't fix the problem, and then he took this down as well. But this is what he was trying to do for a long time, and then after all of that, after everyone complained, and there were so many mainstream media outlets, late night comedy shows, that obviously knew what he was trying to do, give this gift to Trump, that he finally canceled the project altogether of buying the Bible for every classroom. However, he decided to buy 500 Bibles by himself, more than 500 Bibles for use in AP government classrooms. So he's not giving Bibles to every teacher, he's giving them to the teachers who teach AP government. And if you know anything about AP government, which by the way, this is a class Ryan Walters used to teach, so he should know this. Like, AP classes, by their very nature, are standardized across the country, and they're so regimented. I used to teach math, it was mentioned in the introduction. I taught like AP statistics. My day-to-day curriculum is I have to get this done today. I have to get this done tomorrow, and if I don't do that, I'm not going to get the kids the information they need by the time they take the test at the end of the year. I don't have time to do other stuff. And if, God forbid, we miss a day of school, oh my God, that throws us all off. So the idea that he's giving 500 Bibles to AP Gov teachers, those are the teachers who least need extra stuff to work into their curriculum. They already have all the materials they need for AP Gov. They're not on their own. AP classes are pretty universal. You can get material for that from anywhere. Why would you give it to those teachers? It's to make a political point. It's not because these teachers need it, but this is what he did. He's like, fine, you won't let me buy the Trump Bibles, I'll just send you a Bible to use, but he's not saying they even have to use it, he's just sending it to them. But here's the thing, so at this point, this is cutting to like November of last year, at this point, with all the shenanigans he has been doing, he is upsetting even Republicans in the state of Oklahoma, and that's pretty hard to pull off. They actually tried to get this guy impeached. And here's what's wild about it, had nothing to do with the Bibles. Had nothing to do with the Christian nationalism, because they're fine with that. They actually, a handful, like 24 Republicans in the state house sent a letter to the Republican Speaker of the House saying, we want to launch an investigation into Ryan Walters, which would be the first step to an impeachment vote. But they listed out, there are a lot of reasons we have a problem with what he is doing in his position. And this is what's amazing. Some of this is wild, and I want to make sure I get this right. Here's an example of what they cited, because they did not mention the Bible thing. After the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, Oklahoma lawmakers, they were not going to do anything to stop guns, but they passed a bill to give $150 million to public schools to enhance security. Because they're not going to stop guns, but like, hey, you want a new door? We'll get you a new door. So $150 million. That amounts to about $100,000 a year for 3 years for every school district in the state. And the thing is, some of those superintendents of these school districts said, there are some security upgrades we could make, but it might cost not $100,000, it might cost $250,000. So hey, can we not use the money year one and not use the money year two, and then when we get that third check, can we then just save it and then use it down the line? And by and large, no one had a problem with this. They said, yeah, we allocated the money to you, so sure, if you want to wait till year 3 and then do everything at once, it's on you. That's your call. Your public school districts get to make that decision. Well, Ryan Walters took it upon himself to say, if you didn't use the money in year 1, I'm not going to give it to you at all.
Oh.
So the Republicans are like, we allocated money for this, and he's withholding it from those school districts. That seems like an impeachable offense. So that's one of the things they mentioned in this letter. They also said he's not giving us, lawmakers, information about how he's spending taxpayer dollars for his office's travel budget. Because Ryan Walters loves to travel. And he travels to right-wing Christian conferences around the country on the taxpayer's dime. And when lawmakers said, hey, where are you going? Why are you taking a posse with you to all these places? He's not answering them. There was another one. He won't fulfill open records requests from people who want to know, where is all this information coming from? Where are you doing all this from? And here's the most damning one. In 2023, the state legislature passed a bill to give schools emergency inhalers in case kids have asthma. And they would buy something called spacers, which allows multiple kids to use the same inhaler. So they budgeted for this. They passed a bill to give schools that, I think it was only $250,000 total. Ryan Walters never spent that money, and the schools never got the inhalers. So he's literally just not doing his job, and he's not doing things the lawmakers have already passed bills for. So they said, we want to try to impeach him, because he's literally not doing the stuff he's supposed to be doing. Unfortunately, they just didn't have enough support, because there are only 3 Democrats in the state of Oklahoma. And even when you add in the handful of Republicans that wanted him out, they didn't have the numbers to pull it off. So the Speaker of the Oklahoma House said, we're not launching an investigation into this. So that plan failed. So this is where it gets, what happened after that? We get to December, now he knows he's unstoppable. They tried to impeach him, they can't. So now Ryan Walters is like, I'm immune from everything. So he issues a press release saying, hey, we just revised the state standards for social studies classes that everyone has to take from K through 12th grade. And he said specifically, the new standards include Superintendent Walters' Bible curriculum recommendations and mention the Bible and its historical impact over 40 times. Quote, Oklahoma is putting the Bible and the historical impact of Christianity back in school. Now this is where, this isn't just, I'm going to give you a Bible, use it in the classroom. This is, we're changing the bare minimum you will have to do in your schools, because these are now the state standards. You can't get away from this anymore. And what's in those standards when he finally sends these out? This is a couple examples of, this is like a giant 200 to 300 page document. But for example, grade 1, this is what it said. One of the things they got to do in first grade, explain the purpose and the meaning of the Pledge of Allegiance and the significance of the phrase under God.
Would they tell the truth?
Would they tell the truth? I mean, it's up to the teacher. But you have to know that, while I'm sure everyone in here knows, oh, it was added in 1954. It was a political move. How many teachers know that? How many teachers are going to be able to explain that in a way that makes sense to first graders versus just saying, well, we live in a nation that loves God. Like, that's kind of what they're doing here. That's just one example of it. Look at, I don't know if I highlighted this. Look at D. Explain appropriate ways to show respect during the playing of the national anthem. I assume that means if you take a knee, you are not showing respect. If you turn your back. And, okay, why would you take a knee? Why would you turn your back? Because you're such a patriot that you want the country to do better. That is apparently not a good show of patriotism. So you got to teach kids that. What else is there in here? This is another one. Explain how we celebrate our nation and its history through patriotic songs. God bless America, of course. Identify and explain the meaning of the U.S. official motto, "In God We Trust," including the importance of religion to American people. Like, if anything, every survey that comes out shows Americans are less and less part of organized religion than ever before. They're not atheists, but they're like quickly becoming nuns, N-O-N-E-S. So this idea that, oh yeah, in God we trust, to pretend that's anything but political, and to pretend that, oh, all American, if you're a good American, of course you like religion. Like, that's the standard that he's pushing for. What about in second grade? Second graders, that's what you get from the first two. Identify stories from Christianity that influenced the colonists, founders, and culture, including the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. For example, the Golden Rule, which, by the way, not a Jesus original, and the Sermon on the Mount, which, you know what? Fine, let's teach the Sermon on the Mount, but you know who doesn't care about the Sermon on the Mount? It's all the Republicans who don't care about helping the least of these. So, but again, this idea that, oh, you gotta know certain stories that influence the colonists, that is the sort of religious whitewashing that is pushed by guys like David Barton, very powerful in the Christian right, because his whole shtick is the entire country was founded on Christianity, and like the Constitution took lines from the Bible, and he just lies. None of that stuff is true. It's been debunked over and over. It was debunked so many times that when David Barton wrote a book about Thomas Jefferson, the Christian publisher is like, we got to take this off the shelves. There are too many lies in this book. Which raises a whole nother question of, wait, what's your standard for taking a book off the shelves for telling lies? But that's David Barton, and this guy's just putting that right into the curriculum. There are some founders, some of the founding fathers, yeah, they were Christian, but not all of them. And I promise you a whole bunch of the ones who were Christian are not the sort of Christians like Ryan Walters. So this idea, but he's just trying to get this right into the bloodstream of American youth in the state, which is to say, yeah, Christianity influenced the founding of our country. Because if they believe that, you can tell them a lot of things that are not true. What about in high school? This is maybe my favorite example. There is apparently an elective class that high schoolers can take in Oklahoma called like totalitarianism in the 20th century. And you learn about dictators across the world and what they had in common and things like that. Very interesting elective class. But one of the things is, describe the Christian idea, it's only a Christian idea, none of the rest of you think of this, about the equality of souls, which is news to me. Oh, everyone's equal? Really? Not the way they practice it, depending on who we're talking about. The Christian ideal of charity, because charity is also a Christian original, and the renunciation of worldly wealth. Okay.
Does that include Donald Trump?
Does it? Does it? I don't know. By the way, the standards also mention that high school students, they have to summarize the political impact of President Clinton's impeachment, which is good. They should know, what was the impact of that? Why did it happen? What happened as a result of it? But it makes no mention of either of Donald Trump's two impeachments in these standards, either. By the way, who wrote these standards that Ryan Walters put out there last December? Who wrote it? It was a committee of about 10 people. They included a co-founder of PragerU, a representative from the American Enterprise Institute, the president of the Heritage Foundation, which is the group behind Project 2025, and only 3 of them ever lived in Oklahoma. No Oklahoma teachers or administrators were on that committee at all to discuss what teachers should be teaching in Oklahoma schools. So at this point, you know who's really unhappy with Ryan Walters? Kevin Stitt, the governor of Oklahoma, who's like, you're making me look bad, probably because Ryan Walters is making him look moderate. And he's trying to decide what his next steps are because he can't run for governor in 2026 because he's term limited out. And he's like, you're making me look bad. I gotta do something to try to put a stop to all this. And the thing is, everything I'm showing you here, this is Ryan Walters saying this is the standards we're proposing, but they're not a done deal yet. The legislature gets a chance to vote on them. So it's a months-long procedure. So Kevin Stitt says, I'm gonna put 3 new members on the State Board of Education. These are my people, not the ones who are loyal to you necessarily. And he installed them in February, and they get a chance to review all this. So what happened in February, after the public had seen all of this, and discussed all of this, and sent in comments about why this is a bad idea, the State Board of Education had to still approve the standards, and then the legislature would get a chance to say yes or no to that. If they do nothing, then the standards move on. If they decide to say no, they gotta go back to the drawing board. So that's kind of the process. So what happens at that first meeting of the State Board of Education, where Kevin Stitt has now put in a few of his own members, Ryan Walters goes to the Board of Education and he tells the members there, hey, here's the standards, we've made some revisions, but I need you guys to vote on this today. And they're like, it's mid-afternoon and you just emailed us with this last night. We haven't had a chance to read it. He's like, well, you gotta vote on it today, because if you don't vote on it today, the legislature doesn't get a chance to look at this and weigh in on this, and that's on you then, that's your fault, so I need you to vote on this now. And because they were so scared that, oh no, if we're holding up the whole thing, then the legislature won't be able to do anything as bad for all the students, all right, fine, we will just say yes to it. So the Board of Education approved the standards. This is Kevin Stitt with Ryan Walters back in happier times. Very diverse group. After they approved it, journalist Judd Legum, he pointed out, Walters did not send the new standards with his additions. He made some changes to the members of the board until 4 p.m. the day before their 9:30 meeting. This did not give members enough time to read the new standards, which are about 400 pages long. Some of the members said later they didn't even realize the new standards were different from the ones that were already problematic. Turns out Ryan Walters went through and made changes after the public weighed in and didn't tell anyone what the changes were and didn't announce them publicly. And no one knew this until after the State Board of Education had already voted yes to the new standards. So after they said yes, now people are like, wait, what's the new version and where does it go from there? So what does it change? Well, here's an example. There was a whole section on the Trump administration. What do high school students taking US history need to know about the first Trump administration? And some of this is okay. Identify major policy issues such as tax cuts, immigration, border security. Yes, those are political issues, but yes, high school students studying the first Trump administration should have a general sense of what was being discussed. What did people do in reaction to it? Well, look at C. Explain the responses to... Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up for a second. This is the old version of the standards. Old version. This is what kids should learn about Donald Trump. Explain the responses to and the impact of the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. Yeah, if you remember, that was a big deal. Kids should know what Black Lives Matter did, what it was, why did it start, why did that movement grow, evaluate federal and private response to the COVID epidemic. Yeah, kids, you should know what decisions were made. Examine issues related to the election of 2020. Mail-in balloting went up by a lot for reasons. January 6th happened because of the election of 2020. So if you're teaching US history and you're trying to teach what just happened in recent American history, these are the things that social studies teachers said, this is kind of the general sense of what we think kids should know. and then it's up to individual school districts and teachers to decide how do you want to teach this. That's how it works. What did Ryan Walters do to this section? This is an example of his revised policy that he did not tell anyone about. Look at C. Identify the source of the COVID pandemic from a Chinese lab. Apparently that's a fact now. Who knew? Look at D. Identify discrepancies in the 2020 elections by looking at graphs, including the sudden halting of ballot counting in select cities and key battleground states, the security risks of mail-in balloting, sudden batch dumps, an unforeseen record number of votes, because who knew that in 2024 compared to 2020, when you couldn't go outside, more people might vote, and the unprecedented contradiction of bellwether county trends. It's all like Dinesh D'Souza conspiracy theories that are now making their way into a discussion of what happened in 2020. This is what he is pushing for in his revised standards that no one saw. This is...
There's so many villains.
So,
There's just too many villains.
that's just one example of what he changed. This might be the most egregious version of what he changed. He didn't take out any of the Bible stuff, as far as I could tell. And yeah.
Did he make any notable Christian changes to the science curriculum?
Any Christian-ish changes to the science curriculum? No, because the only thing he was saying is this is the new social studies curriculum, so they weren't touching any other subjects yet. So theoretically, I think this was due for a revision, which is why they were pushing it now. And if it gets passed, it lasts for like 5 years. I may be wrong on that. But that's why this was up for discussion, whereas science standards were not up for discussion right now. So this is what he's pushing through. This did get a lot of headlines that in Oklahoma, they want kids to learn about the quote-unquote discrepancies of 2020. And so what happened when he did this? The State Board of Education passed it, because they didn't even see this. It gets to the legislature, who, by the way, had an extra month. There was no reason they needed to vote on this set of standards when Ryan Walters told them to do it. Had they done it at their next meeting a month later, legislature would have had enough time to look at it as well, but Ryan Walters wanted this to get through. And then the only stopgap you have is the legislature saying, we are voting no on this. And guess what happened with that a couple weeks ago? They didn't have the votes to say no. They didn't vote yes, they didn't vote to approve it, but they don't have the votes to say no to it, which means this automatically goes through. These are now the standards for social studies in the state of Oklahoma, starting with the next school year. This is what Ryan Walters is doing with his power at this point. So this is kind of where we are at now. And the only question is, I used to think Ryan Walters was doing all the things I'm telling you about because he really hoped that if Trump won in 2024, he would be picked as Secretary of Education. And then for whatever reason, and I'm honestly surprised by this, Trump didn't go with him and went with the wrestling lady. I feel like that had to bother Ryan Walters at some level, but that means he's still in Oklahoma for the time being. There's no election until 2026. But what's interesting there is, in 2026, like I said, Kevin Stitt, the current governor, he's term limited out. So there is like an internal battle over which Republican is going to be the Republican nominee, because you have to assume a Republican's going to win that state. And right now, Ryan Walters has not jumped into the ring, though there were, just this week, he did a press conference, and people were asking him, are you going to run for governor in 2026? And he's like, considering it, but right now we have to talk about all this stuff. So he's considering it. The front runner right now is the current Attorney General of Oklahoma, Gentner Drummond, who again has been a surprising champion of church-state separation. The guy who fought against that charter school that was Catholic, like, he's been weirdly amazing at all the issues, church-state issues that we care about. He's the front runner because of name recognition, he's won state-level races that are high profile. But if Ryan Walters jumps into that race, you have to assume, again, Republican primary is what you're trying to win at that point. That could go his way. I don't know, it's very early, anything could happen. But I feel like that's where this is going. And if you give Ryan Walters more power, we've seen what he does when he has any power, and he doesn't care if he's upsetting teachers or whatever, but this is just a microcosm of what one dude has done in that state, and a lot of other states have taken cues from this guy, because if he could pull it off in a red state, there are plenty of other places that will want to follow suit. Louisiana, last year, they passed a law saying put the 10 Commandments in every classroom. Every one of them.
Yeah.
And it did get shot down by a federal judge, and it's still in the courts in the appeals process. However, what happened after they got it passed? Other states started filing copycat bills to get it done there, because they're like, hey, let's start seeing if any judges agree with us. Yeah, of course we'll get sued over this. But maybe some judge will say it's okay, because they never say we're trying to push Christianity in schools. They're saying, it's 10 Commandments, it's religion. We're trying to show tradition, because the 10 Commandments are part of our legal history and stuff like that. And as soon as you get one judge to say yes, the only way to break that conflict is by getting it to the Supreme Court, which really likes the argument of tradition for anything Christian. So anyway, I'll stop there for now. Sorry to introduce you to that guy if you didn't know him in advance, but happy to take any questions if you have any. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, just minor, what the 500 Bibles that he wanted to put in, do we know what version of the Bible he was going to put in there?
I assume it would have to be the KJV Bible that was sent, the 500 Bibles.
The Trump Bible, though, is what I meant.
I don't think he bought the Trump Bibles necessarily, only because I feel like I would have heard of that one by now. It would be much easier and cheaper if you want to send 500 to just send a Bible to those classes, whether or not they use them. Because again, I think what Ryan Walters wanted is the headline that says, I sent 500 Bibles to these teachers.
If he didn't send the Trump Bible, is that why he wasn't chosen as...
Because Trump never got that bride. I have not read anything about why Trump did not choose that guy as education secretary. And again, that guy was tailor-made for this administration. And he's not the only option. There are other people they could have gone with who have some foot in the education world. So I still have yet to understand why he went with Linda McMahon over...
more money to his campaign.
She gave more money to his campaign, whereas if he wanted to ingratiate himself with his base, they don't care about Linda McMahon, his base.
But he already had that.
But she gave him money, yes. But again, if she gets fired for whatever reason, that's what's going to happen. Yeah. Other questions?
So, two. One's an observation. I did notice in the picture of his Bible and Constitution, that Constitution book had never been opened. It's not even crease on it. But my real question is, this is a great villain origin story that you started off. Are we seeing any other states trying stuff like this?
Are we seeing other states kind of doing what Ryan Walters...
As a kind of a bellwether.
Right. Right now, I think what Ryan Walters has been doing is so brazen that even other states, like, one, you don't necessarily need a Secretary of Education or someone in that position to do what Ryan Walters is doing when you have a legislature that's already going to give you everything you want. So I haven't really seen any other education leaders in other states, even red states, pull off what he's trying to do, but sometimes it's because you don't need them to do it, because the legislature does it anyway. Other red states have attorneys general, who are more than willing to go along with what the right-wing conservative Christians want, but they don't have that in Oklahoma. So Ryan Walters is like, well, if you're not going to do it, and the legislature has some issues with me, even though I can get a lot of this done, I'll just do it myself, raise my profile, and keep doing it. I mean, Florida has done some of this stuff. They have pushed through state standards for social studies as well that dismantle the idea of church-state separation. They actually have, in Florida, they have teacher trainings where, hey, teachers, if you want to come in for a 3-day crash course on, whatever class it is you're teaching, we will pay you to spend 3 days with us and do the training. But when you see the slides they're using for the training, it's revisionist Christian history, right? So they've done it to some extent, but you don't need a guy like Ryan Walters to pull it off in Florida when the lawmakers will do it themselves. Yeah. Yeah.
Who's the most important or powerful public person, elected official, that will fight for the separation of church?
Who's the most powerful politician who will fight for separation of church and state? Oh boy, at this point,
The caucus.
yeah, there is a Congressional Free Thought Caucus that has like 29 members now, and they fight for this stuff. Are they powerful? We'll see. They don't sway the votes. I think right now the best. It's not a singular example, but you have individual elected officials in Congress and some governors. Hey, Illinois. I mean, you have people who will fight for church-state separation, even if it's not the core of what they do, who are really well spoken about it. Jamie Raskin is amazing on these issues. He's not the only one. He's the co-chair of that Free Thought Caucus. But are they powerful? Well, if Democrats take over the House, they can do investigations into some of these things. Then we are talking. At the moment, the most powerful people with a voice on this stuff don't have the power they need to stop a lot of this. So what has to happen then is trying to raise the issue and get this in front of people's attention. This is not just about pushing Christianity in schools. This is going to hurt Oklahoma students. I remember back in the day when they were discussing like creationism in science classes or intelligent design in science classes, there were scientific journals and spokespeople who made the call that if this state goes through with teaching intelligent design and kids don't get a good understanding of evolution, it is going to make them less attractive to colleges that they are applying to, and that's a reason.
Depends which colleges they're applying to.
What is that?
Depends which colleges.
Depends which college, right? You'll get into Harding.
Trump University.
But yeah, that was the push they made, and that was not the argument I would use, like that's not why it's wrong. But again, if that works, great, but that's what's gonna have to start happening. More people outside of our circles where we care about church-state separation need to understand why this stuff is bad. And sometimes it just takes people with a high profile to talk about this stuff. And again, what Ryan Walters is doing is so brazenly corrupt and weird that he's making headlines beyond Oklahoma. Like, his stuff gets in national news because everyone's making fun of him. And I'm sure he loves that. But also, more people know about this stuff because he's not subtle about anything he's trying to do. And maybe that works to an advantage if anyone ever cared about this stuff. Yeah.
In North Dakota, and I know you covered this in your newsletter, but in January they introduced Senate Bill 2355, which mandated teaching the evidence for intelligent design in schools.
Yeah.
And a lot of the submitted arguments, the testimony for both the pro and con, did center around how it made North Dakota students like competitive or not competitive, and
Yeah.
the debate was around that. You did get a few things which were, it's just a theory, or it's not a theory at all. The shifting debate is interesting, but a common rhetorical refrain was the competitiveness of North Dakota students.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that bill ended up passing. I think it ended up.
It was shot down.
Yeah, it got shut down, but there are a few states every year that still push for like teach intelligent design because they don't know the language. How do you? Sometimes they will say teach the strengths and weaknesses of evolution, or teach what like the theories. It's just a theory. Like, let us talk about that. But whatever version of it is, yes, there's a scientific argument for why you shouldn't be doing this. How many people want to listen to what science nerds have to say about that stuff? Not necessarily compelling, which is why you see more people just making an argument. You are hurting our students when you teach them this misinformation. And again, that stuff, the evolution stuff, doesn't even have a lot of support among religious right. They're less focused on science and way more focused on history these days. That's where all the excitement is among the conservative Christians who are trying to change public schools, which is a weird shift.
A
Yeah.
comment and a question. The comment is it's not a flaw, it's a feature, because God
Which part? Which is the feature?
the point that it's going to hurt the kids' prospects for getting into a good college or university, because God forbid they should go to University of Chicago or
Yeah.
Yale or Harvard.
You don't want them to get into a good elite school.
Right, you want them to stay uneducated or
Yeah.
go to a Christian school or go to a state school with lower standards, right? And the question isn't directly related to the curriculum stuff, it's when Trump was pushing his Bible and he had this American flags behind him, there was a yellow border at the bottom stripe, and I didn't know if there was a significance to that particular version of the U.S. flag.
I don't remember that.
It was on all three flags behind him, and I didn't know if that was code for something.
I don't remember hearing about that one, so I'm not sure.
It's not, it's a standard decoration on flags that's been used over the decades.
Okay.
Oh,
It's a
interesting.
ceremonial flag.
Ceremonial flags? Yeah.
Just, you probably remember this, if I remember correctly, the Oklahoma state constitution was pretty specific about the separation of church and state and the funding for churches. And I
Yeah.
think
When the Oklahoma Supreme Court said, no, you can't have a Catholic charter school that is taxpayer funded.
Right.
Why? Because Oklahoma has something called the Blaine Amendment that says no taxpayer money can be used to support religion, some variation of that.
Yeah.
And they said, it's right in the state constitution, so I think it was a unanimous ruling, or it was like 6-1 or something like that. They said, yeah, no, this is not legal, and that's what the Supreme Court could overturn, and we don't know how much, or how they could overturn it, or like, how broad would that be? But you're right, like Oklahoma, the state constitution is very strict about church-state separation, and thankfully, a lot of states have constitutions that are very strict about it, which holds back kind of how bad things could get, for now.
Just a comment, it's kind of sad how, I think the problem with the judiciary in general, it's such a, it has to wait till things get there. You know, even, I think that the Kitzmiller versus Dover thing only applies in that one federal circuit, even today. I don't think we have we don't have a ruling about evolution versus
Intelligent design or creationism.
And it's not a national thing at all.
Yeah.
You can still get the right-wing equivalent of Mao sniping all over the place.
There is a group called the National Association of Christian Lawmakers that gets together now once a year. The guy that runs it is a Christian nationalist from Arkansas. But one of the things they do when they get together, and they bring in state-level lawmakers from across the country, and what do they do at these conferences? It's, here's a draft version of a bill, let's flood the zone. If all of your states pass this stuff, they can't all be blocked by judges. Some of you are going to find your way through. And again, if you try to get 10 Commandments laws in all these states, maybe in Louisiana it gets through, even if it gets stopped in other places. And then who knows what the Supreme Court will do. That's kind of what they're doing right now, which is let's try to pass as much stuff as possible while we have the majorities that can get it done. And yeah, judges, there are not enough judges to knock down any of this stuff. And even if there are enough judges, there are a lot of judges who are like, I'm fine with it. So yeah, it's hard. Now, one thing you can do though is, as people try to stop it, as people raise a fuss about it, it does slow down how fast they can get this stuff done. The backlash against Ryan Walters, against the Bible stuff, he's done plenty of stuff that is problematic, but he hasn't been able to do everything he's wanted, because the backlash has been pretty big and widespread. He's still getting a lot done. But again, this is why what we need are people paying attention and raising a fuss about it, especially when it happens in our states, in our communities. And I mean, you all know this, even in Illinois, a blue state, plenty of red communities, plenty of politicians who may want to push for stuff like this. All the more reason to fight back and be a voice that fights back against that stuff. Is there a question there? Yeah.
Yeah, has there been any response from the students themselves in public schools about organizing and speaking out? Or?
I have not seen any organized effort to stop all this stuff, but I have seen plenty. I mean, usually when Ryan Walters issues memos and says this is what has to happen, it's kind of a directive that goes to superintendents and school boards. And that's where you've seen pushback in the media, where the superintendents of some of the larger districts are just defending their turf and saying, well, in this community, we have our standards, we have our curriculum. Actually, one of the things that school boards raised after he issued the new social studies curriculum with the Trump conspiracy 2024 theories and all that 2020 theories, is that they are going to have a hard time finding a textbook publisher that will make a history textbook that includes the stuff they want to. Because think about this, they don't already have those ready to go. that means they gotta write a new textbook to incorporate the Trump conspiracy theories. If they do that, do you wanna write a textbook that is just gonna be bought by a handful of Oklahoma school districts when you could write a history textbook that incorporates so many things that every state wants to teach that you can write a textbook that multiple states want to buy? That's better for you as a publisher. And so they're saying it's gonna be hard to find a publisher that caters to our weird standards. And not only that, if a publisher is known for, oh, these people put out a history book full of misinformation, maybe other states don't want to buy your other books. So one of the arguments that was made by school district officials is, where are we going to find textbook publishers willing to go along with this? And if you don't have a textbook that we're all using, you're letting all these school districts fend for themselves when it comes to how to teach this stuff, and that creates chaos just across the state. So a lot of that pushback is coming from the superintendents and school boards of these districts. So I'm sure there is some resistance among students and maybe a lot more even among teachers, but right now where I'm seeing it in articles and things like that is at a higher level.
I'm not sure I would rely on that last argument of yours.
The textbook one?
The textbook one, because I at work am buying at an inflated price customized textbooks based on one that was printed and sold publicly, but now we wanted the customized version for a special project, and they print them according to how many you want to buy at a time. So I'll say buy 100, buy 100 more, and so because of the technology these days, it's
It
easy,
might be
and
possible.
it's a little more expensive, but it's not prohibitive. So
Interesting.
it's scary to rely on that as an argument.
Fair enough. Yeah. Other questions?
You know, just relating to that, just jog my memory, there was a couple in Texas
The
that were
gamblers.
gamblers who were very active in Texas school book selection. Because Texas, being a very large state, had a big impact on national textbook purchases.
Yeah.
So they made it their mission, Christian or otherwise, to really get in and beat up the publishers and make sure that their viewpoint was represented. They did this for
Yeah, that was a big story for several years.
Yeah.
It was back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And
When that kind of-
because at that time, the publishers didn't have the ability to customize.
Right.
And Texas was the largest
Yeah.
had the largest number of school districts.
Right.
So if the Gallows could get something in a textbook, all the rest of the states would be forced
Right.
to end up using these.
Yeah, and I'm very curious if that changes now because it's easier to customize then. But yeah, you know what's weird? There were years where there were so many stories about the Texas State Board of Education and the textbook issues. I feel like I haven't seen many of those recently, in recent years.
Burning other things.
Yeah. Yeah. In that case, if any of you want to reach out to me, you can always subscribe to my newsletter for free. That's where I do most of my work. You can contact me that way. Otherwise, thank you to FFRF for having me here today. Oh, I also do a Friendly Atheist podcast. You could just search for that.
YouTube.
And YouTube Friendly Atheist, it's all the same. But yeah, thank you so much. I'll be around for a little bit if you have any other questions. Otherwise, thanks to FFRF for having me.
Thank you very much, Hemant. That was a very interesting and enjoyable presentation. Thank you very much.